right, yes, the microphone is working, fantastic. So I believe we have at least the coziest part of today because we are, at least so far, roughly the only ones who can actually sit for a bit longer. So welcome to all our panelists. Welcome, of course, still to the audience who has made it this far into the day already. So this year's conference is obviously centered around using design as a strategic asset. So today, together with our panelists, essentially, we want to explore the question that if design is truly shaping strategy, why is it still a question when budgets tighten? And I believe that is quite an interesting question, especially considering the entire economic situation that we are in right now. However, before I actually want to introduce our panelists, let's quickly jump back in time into our good old encyclopedia, Wikipedia, because I simply took a look at what the panel discussion should be about. And the term was actually first coined by an American educator in 1934. And I'm simply mentioning this because the quote, I think, is quite nice. So he envisioned the panel as a glorified conversation with all the delight of a generous give and take. Simply put, I believe we're just going to have a conversation, so this is not just a straight Q&A, which also applies, of course, to the audience, to all of you, because the quote goes further, and if it is genuinely a good conversation, it also sends people away with a warm feeling, and not only that their own ideas have been clarified, but that their understanding of other points of view has been broadened. So quite a long quote. We'll hopefully cover the last part. However, in order to actually cover that first part, to have all your questions answered, please be remembered to send in all the questions that you have throughout the panel, and then we'll make sure to spend a bit more, potentially than 5 minutes on this, because I can imagine that this is going to be quite interesting for all of you, simply because we have such a diverse set of panelists here. All right, without further ado, I'm going to start introducing it. I'm going to start with you, Steve. I don't think that a lot of introduction is needed anymore.
They told me, yeah.
Then we have Mailis. Mailis, you are head of digital at Estonian Railways, where you are essentially leading all the project initiatives related to customer transformation. Then we have our guest from Lithuania, Dominykas Karpovič. Probably I'm also butchering that last name. My apologies for that. You are a partner and strategy team lead at The Critical, where you are basically leading all the project initiatives related to strategy and innovation. In addition, you are also teaching philosophy of innovation, so that was at least a very interesting perspective that you brought in during the initial conversation we had, so I'm looking forward to that one. And last but not least, we have Eva Laanemaa. You are an e-commerce development manager, B2C and B2B at Magnum, which is a pharmaceutical wholesaler and retailer in the Baltic states. And with this, I also want to point out one thing, namely Apoteka, which is a retail pharmacy company that belongs to the Magnum Group, just recently was awarded with the award for Best Health Products eShop. So I would say, let's give it a round of applause, because I can imagine also Eva played a part in that. All right, though, starting with the questions, and the first one is basically going to be a trick question, namely, how do you define design?
I'll let the designers take that one.
Mailis, may I ask you?
Well, I think I have used design methods already in 15 years in my previous positions. I have been in Estonian Railway only 4 years. So, and my main responsibility is actually leading the change of digital change in Estonian Railway, leading the strategy of digital change. So, but before that, I was actually engaged in local politics and maybe even broader-wise. And there I actually already started to use service design methods to understand why we actually, what kind of services in Estonia local governments need, and why we actually, how we need to design them. Because it's always in public sector, it's more or less so that we know what we do. We are the bureaucrats and we do it. But no, we do it because our customers, Estonian citizens, actually need them. So it's 15 years, more or less, for me, and now I'm in Estonian Railway.
Yeah. So design in that sense, it's about the change and about fulfilling a need that is there.
I have been come to that, and I really liked your spirits idea. This is like, oh. Yeah.
taking it with us.
To understand, yes, you have to understand the changer. So the change is always really difficult. You said it, you are looking at supermarkets and the behavior. And actually engaging the design already in this early stage to understand to whom we are creating it and actually engage already the role of the change makers themselves, so that they don't say it afterwards that, no, this is something that I didn't want.
Yeah. Steve, from your side, because you said that I'm going to start with the design.
Yeah, okay, so I think, I'll tell you what I think the spirit of design is. It's practical curiosity.
Yeah.
So it's practical because it's about delivering useful things, and it's curiosity because there's always somewhere new to look. So I would say it's practical curiosity.
All right, I like the answer. So I said it's a trick question because I'm actually quite curious if, because we are now all at least working some sort of design, at least we are recognizing the value in design. However, how would non-designers essentially define design when you're, for example, talking to shareholders, to board members, to the CEO even? Eva, may I ask you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think design should be part of the business strategy. So it hasn't been always like that. And I think we are in a very different state with the businesses and sensing that and understanding, because the good design is about the end user and the customer and also the business needs and understanding and connecting to have the broader picture of it. So I would say to succeed, it has to be built into your organization and it has to be part of the whole process and the strategy as such. Yeah. So it wouldn't happen like that the designer is the end point, just make the things beautiful.
But how do you get there?
Well, it might be sometimes a rough path to get there if you have like very limited resources, or if you're like starting, or you have like a smaller product. But one tip what I would give you is that if your board doesn't believe into that, then at first just convince them to have like a good UX review. So you would actually get the understanding into the business. Because quite often the understanding or just the idea of design, or we should have like a better user experience and all this and that, it might not come along. And we all have different knowledge base and different functions, but we need the functions to connect everything together. And I would think that a good designer is a great glue that puts everything as a one and presents it and understands to whom they are doing it.
Dominykas, anything to add?
Yeah, actually, I have a little bit, I'm cheating here because I spent some time on trying to define design, because I'm not a designer, but I work with them a lot. And I had one perspective when our companies merged, and because I'm coming from philosophy and research more and other parts. But now I can say that probably the most precise definition for myself is that design is poetry that aims. And what I mean by that poetry is usually like coming from the art perspective, and that it's something related to very individual self-realization. So it is very, very subjective. But the aiming part comes from the context. So with what kind of product you're working, with what kind of target audience, and so on and so forth. So the thing is that you have certain maybe KPIs or something that you're aiming at. So when you combine those two parts, when you don't sublime the subjective part of a designer, not saying that, okay, it has to be a certain trend or a certain standard, but you're saying, okay, this is you. We need you. Actually, because we have like in our agency, we have different designers, and some designers are better in this case or the other case. And you're saying, this is you, we need you, and okay, let's define the aim. And the magic goes here. So I would say that design is the poetry that aims. So you have that beautiful part where it's like beauty. What is beauty? The other question. Yeah, and then, but it has to be practical. And so that poetry that aims, which is kind of, I would say, creates a positive tension, between what you're heading and who you are, and it creates magic. Not always, but when it does, it's really, really beautiful and impactful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would define it this way.
Yeah, thank you. So let's connect this to a business impact, because I said this year's conference is kind of around that theme. And Eva, I'm going to start with you simply for the award that I now just mentioned. So are you aware, or actually what are the business outcomes that design, in the case maybe of Apotheka, has actually influenced in your experience?
I think probably the failures.
The failures? Good one, yeah.
Yeah, because we all have some, and it does happen. Even if you've prepared very well and you've analyzed, and even if you've had the resources to test it out, sometimes it happens. And I think these things actually put the most growth into it. And also grow the team and the whole understanding around your product as well. So, yeah, I would say failures.
I can imagine that when you're walking into a boardroom and then you're saying, hey, we've only had failures, but please keep investing in design. That's not necessarily a good conversation, or at least not the outcome you'd like to have. So how do you approach these type of conversations?
Well, then you would probably need to take a look into your team if you have only failures. But usually we mostly have successes. So I think it's the combination of that and understanding of the outcome out of it as well. I'm not sure that how much we actually do analyze afterwards. This is probably something which is not always, but sometimes still like taking a small steps, not as big as it would require. Yes, the understanding of what we've learned is that gives us the growth, because we need to understand. But still, I believe that mostly we do have successes. And that would actually prove the benefit of the whole team and the existence.
Well, successes are needed, yeah.
Can I just
Go ahead, yeah,
so I
absolutely.
think something that Marzi said this morning about reframing is, okay, so you've got a failed prototype, well, reframe it. It's better than a failed product that you didn't bother to test. Failing on paper is much, much cheaper than failing in the market.
Of course.
So it's reframing.
Yeah, it's even worse when you're already using it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you understand that it's total failure. Then then you have already like bad customer input as well. So it's a trust issue, so to say, that using design in this first phase. And actually, I think for in the board level, it's really good to use data for that, to actually show or the analysis that if we're using design in the first phase, we do the prototypes, we do the mock-ups, whatever, and we understand the value of this product service, and do we really reach our goal? Because otherwise, if we are going to the next stages, then it's always more costly. And this is data that you can actually use, because every board member likes to see it in money ways. So it's like, if you're saying that the failures are the most that we actually learn from, then of course.
Yeah. Well, go
Just
ahead.
to add,
Absolutely.
it doesn't mean that you have to fail in live.
Oh, of course.
So
But
that's where you learn the most.
Yeah.
But it is the part of the process.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, why you do the process over and over again. So, yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah?
Well, I was going to continue alongside the data topic, but please feel free to
I just want
still
to
add something.
I just want to go on a little bit on the opposing side for one thing, because I have seen these things happening over and over again. I actually don't think that designers should think a lot, should be business savvy, because then you start losing your grip if you over-focus on that. So my suggestion is, I mean, there are multiple people who are business savvy, so just have a connection with a the manager, the project manager, have a good conversation with them, and he can actually do, or she can prepare and pitch the design itself. So I think we put too much stress on making a Swiss knife. And in some cases, when you're self-employed and you want to do that, that's one story. When a different context appears and you're in a bigger team or something, you need to focus on other things. And besides that, we also need to remember that we decide from the emotional part of our brains. So what you were talking about, the spirits and everything, which I don't believe, I know that it is there. Yeah. So we forget that. And if we focus only on the spreadsheet and the KPIs and forget the story, nobody will go that direction. So basically what you need to figure out, okay, it's better to have a team who is pitching the idea or the design, and not to forget that actually we decide from our emotional part of the brain, not the analytical one. Yeah. So that's kind of crucial if you want to convince somebody.
It reminds me of Marzia. I saw you over there with the language that you basically need to be able to speak, maybe not fluently, but at least to be able to have a B1 conversation, let's say. That's at least what I'm hearing. Mailis, you also mentioned data. Mailis also mentioned multiple other metrics. Yesterday in Vitali's workshop, we also talked about quite a lot of YÖK's metrics. Are these metrics, because you come from both public sector, private sector, throughout your career, of course, you went through multiple positions. So what kind of metrics, if we then actually apply it in the practical life, what kind of metrics can you use to actually, let's say, convince leadership to start investing into design?
You mean me? Or?
Absolutely, go ahead. Whoever goes first.
Well, it actually depends. What kind of, what are we actually like, what are the measurements? For us, we always use UX metrics, financial metrics, it's always good. If we are in the change, then we actually look the changers themselves as well. We actually have the metrics of how many changers are already involved to the change, because from a change management perspective, it's always good to understand who are the opposites of this, who are the opposites of the change. Mm-hmm. And if there's gonna be too many of them, then they actually gang up on you.
No,
so,
I understand, yeah.
Yeah, and this is one like crucial metrics that we need to look. After all, we are all humans. Mm-hmm. We don't like change. Mm-hmm. We are in this environment right now where change is happening like every day. Mm-hmm. And it's too much. And it's actually psychological. So that's why for me, one like really good metrics is to understand how many people a person I have to actually like engage, mm-hmm. and how many of them don't want to change. Mm-hmm.
Steve, I'm going to ask you the question as a follow-up from your previous conversation. So you're talking about the people that you essentially need to convince, you need to understand them in the first place.
Yep.
How does that play into the spirits, the animals of these people, the inner animal? Well,
yeah, it is good to understand the people you're talking to. What is there? What's motivating them? I mean, obviously, business success, but there'll be more than that. I mean, that's a given. Nobody is in business to do less business. So what else is motivating them? Are they excited about new things? Are they animated by the spirit of the explorer? Or are they more animated by the spirit of the guardian of, let's hang on to what we've got and protect what we've got? Even that basic distinction is useful to know how you frame your suggestions when you're going to the people who are in charge. And you'll pick up a feeling. The young man in the front row asked me, how do you find out? Well, you will pick up a feeling for where people are at just by how they behave. So when you suggest something new to somebody, do they kind of lean forward and like, oh, that's exciting? Or are they kind of going, leaning back? That's telling you something. This is why, by the way, you need to be working in offices with people, not on Zoom calls. Because on Zoom calls,
Totally agree
you don't
on
get the
that.
body language, you don't pick up you don't get the signals. It's harder to get the signals in remote working. So that's why it's nice to work in offices, I think. So it's nice to come to conferences.
As a follow-up, as a non-designer as well,
Yes.
what convinces you?
Stories.
If I wanted to get now budget from you.
So
What design?
I used to work at the BBC with a lot of engineers, and they would have these amazing data sets, and they'd be talking about audience behavior in big data numbers. And then they'd tell me about a little moment of observation of audience, of one person's behavior, and I go, oh, that's so exciting. And they go, Steve, that's just an anecdote. That's not data. Oh, okay. Sorry. But and there's a saying, the plural of anecdote is not data, it's just more anecdotes. But an anecdote is like a little blip on the radar, a little boom on the radar saying, oh, maybe there's something here. And if it goes bing, bing, bing 3 times, 3 little weird stories, that's worth investigating. So I'm fascinated by the story, and I'm misled by the story. I pay too much attention to story, but what do you do? I'm not very good with data.
Yeah. So there's the story and there's the metrics, essentially, that we can use as our tool.
You have to, as Dominykas was saying, you have to be able to do both. You have to be able to look at it's the magic happens with that interface between data and story, between data and insight, which is instinct. Between data and instinct, that's where the magic happens. You have to remember if you love data and you're one of these people who loves a database, not everything that matters can be measured. So sometimes it's not on the spreadsheet, and it never will be.
Yeah. Fair. Okay, so in the beginning, in the very introduction, we then also talked about the economic pressure. Whether, for example, it's then rather seen as a cost center, essentially, or rather seen as a competitive advantage. So what's your take on that, whether it's a cost center or a competitive advantage? Why not? Dominykas, may I start with you?
I'll go from this angle probably. When we talk, and I used to be, and I still am in various other ventures besides the agency, and I tend to look at it as the investment. And this perspective changes when usually, for example, clients are coming in, okay, we should do that and that and that. And then we're saying, okay, so are you willing to invest this amount of money for what? And sometimes we ditch the clients because we're saying, you just want something nice and it's not worth the investment. And then, there is a dissatisfaction and so on. So the question is, do you have a challenge? If you have a challenge, because sometimes we're saying everything is working, why don't we need to do something a little bit? Okay, that's fine, but what's the challenge? And if you can define a particular challenge, then you can measure the investment that you want to put in to make that change. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's like too much, maybe it's too less, but reshaping the perspective towards that, okay, so this is the investment, and how much do you want to invest for that impact to happen?
Yeah.
So I see design in this way, but I think that it has to usually start from this perspective, because if you think about the costs, it just changes the landscape and you cannot move forward. So this is the I would say the cornerstone how we operate, and then when you change that perspective, you can start having the dialogue there.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the investment, and I remember James was also talking about the return on investment, that you basically need to calculate it in the beginning, throughout, and at the end, for example. Is that something that is applied in real life, let's say?
Yeah, so I won't go a lot into that, but we preach impact, measuring the impact, which is, in our case, it's like societal, environmental, economical, and cultural. So in case of a change that you want to make, when we work with big corporations, the question is, okay, so it's not only the bottom line, not only economical, so you want to make an impact. So we have 4 perspectives, where and which kind of impact you want to make, and how we can measure that. Mm-hmm. But the interesting part is, like, everybody, the companies are saying, okay, that's fine, let's do that. But we're saying you need to start, you need to create the formula, start measuring now. Mm-hmm. And you need, to invest into the formula and calculation, because if we are not measuring it now, when we have the change, how we can say that the change happened? And here is the problems, that usually they have data sets, but they haven't thought about it through certain perspectives and so on and so forth. So the thing is, like, when you want to measure, you need to define the formula, start measuring at the beginning. So it's obvious, but from my experience, that not a lot of companies do that. They tend to do and then measure, and then they try to figure out, okay, so what happened? Because we don't have the data from this point when we started the change.
Yeah, so it's the baseline that you need to create. Absolutely. Eva, how is it? How is this return of investment? Are you working with it yourself, for example? Are you using it? Is it something that you could potentially start using because you see the advantage of it, for example?
Well, I think it varies a lot, depending of the same thing as a problem, and not everything is measurable. I totally agree with these things. Also, I agree with the stating the problem and starting to measure it beforehand to actually understand of the cause and the benefit or the investment value as well. But I think that part from the product is not going anywhere. There will be the bits and pieces or the big things that are not entirely measurable. And that's why what we previously said, that's the magic, and where the magic happens, and how we do, I would say, in the backbone, understand what the magic is and how to solve it. And that we can't measure. But that's the whole benefit of the good product. And understanding about the metrics maybe as well. I would say one big metric is actually your customers and the feedback of your customers.
Which was it? What was that?
Customers.
It's not metric as such. It might be. I'm not a big believer into NPS or so, but actually combine together your customers' feedback and to understand the entire maybe impact with the end users.
Yeah.
That would be probably the goal.
Yeah, I can imagine also with the stuff, let's say, that we can't measure, it's then, for example, or could be advantages to go back to the spirits, to the animals, to the archetypes, basically, and to also have a backup essentially based on these concepts. All right, thank you very much to our 4 panelists over here. We have 3 more minutes to spare, and I would like to go into the questions that have been asked. Let me quickly take a look at what we have here.
While you're looking through, let's give people in the room two quick magic words that when you have a very strong opinion about your professional expertise and you're trying to give advice to your boss who isn't the same profession as you, they're not a designer, 2 magic words you can use. You say, in my opinion, we should do this, for example. And the for example is a case study of, okay, so in my opinion, we should spend £100,000 on user research. For example, in Lego, they spent £100,000 on user research and they got insights they're still using 10 years later about customer behavior. So it's that, for example, you're dropping from advice and wisdom, which is high-level expertise, you're dropping from expertise into story. And one story, for example, boom, something that your competitors are doing. For example, here's a prototype, we tried it. For example, in my last job, we did this. For example, takes you from expertise, wisdom, into story.
I have found a very, very nice one, and I'm going to give this one to you, Dominykas, simply based on your background in philosophy, essentially. So the question is, design once created objects and visuals. Now it shapes systems, economies, organizations, and AI. If it touches everything, has it gained power or lost meaning?
Good question. Good question.
A very good question. I think that if you look through the lens of, if you're actually a very good expert and you love what you do, you will find those things that you do in all different phenomena in life. It could be design, it could be architecture, it could be like everything is some kind of architecture, system is an architecture, and so on. And I think what we have recognized through the history, let's say, that we recognize that why design matters, I would say, in this case, and we expanded seeing the design in various shapes and forms because we recognize that there is no such a thing as an object, it's a phenomenon. we as human beings, we live in worlds that are defined by certain values, certain stories, and so on.
Spirits.
And then spirits. And then the thing is, what you do, you create for humans. You don't create for, usually, you don't create for something beside the customer. It's a human being. And if you're creating for a human being, you need then, then you need to penetrate into his or her world. And it means then you need a certain, then you are going into phenomenon world. So there's it's not an object, a phenomenon. What phenomenon is, it means that when you go with the question, you are not asking, how should I build a table? The question is, what does it mean? What does it mean to have dinner, for example? That's how you design a kitchen table. What does it mean to have lunch? Or what does it mean to drink a cup of coffee in Estonia? What does it mean for Estonian to drink coffee? It's very different than for a person from Bhutan to drink coffee. And when you come from this question, then you need to design, because I think design is about creating those phenomena, going into that world. So that's why I think, because design is about that unseen part, in between parts. Yeah. So when you recognize that it's a phenomenon, not an object, then you need a design perspective. Then you suddenly see that you need to design a system, not objects. Yeah. So I don't know if I've answered. I tried somehow.
Well, basically, instead of losing meaning, it's about actually either giving back the meaning to, for example, a table, or actually making people aware of what the meaning of such a table is in the first place. Okay, we are only, unfortunately, we're able to cover one question. If you do want to have your question answered, please feel free to obviously reach out to these fantastic panelists. Thank you to all of you, and then we're going to go to the next part, I believe.
Thank you, Lea. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.